Dean Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, the Biafran legend and leader of his people.
And in course of my taking brief here in the university, I discovered the great gap that Dean Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu was not placed in our academic activities in the university. Hence, I made a proposal to have him on the university academic calendar by instituting a memorial lecture in his honor. The university senate. Today's lecture being the first is to lay the background for subsequent lectures in the future. In the future, we intend to focus on socio-economic and political issues which may be national or international in nature. Today's lecture will be on that man of history, theme Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. Once more, on behalf of the University Governing Council, the Senate, the staff, and students, I welcome all our guests to Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu University, Anambra State.
Ojukwu was a David who had battled against a menacing Goliath called Nigeria. For the safety and survival of his people, he was a superhuman who did for the benefit of his people, but was subdued by a combination of forces too rich for any man or society to withstand.
I've come only to make 2 points. The first is a gratitude to the university, the Chukwuemeka Odumegwu University, for thinking it fit, for the presence of mind, to organize the first memorial lecture. We often celebrate only the dead, and I only hope that someday we'll begin to celebrate also the living. The man Ojukwu himself is an encyclopedia.
Let me repeat, we are here to convince, not to cajole. We are here to debate, not to decry. And we are here to persuade rather than to pervert. Even if we disagree, let us keep it civil. And quite often, what people will see as disagreement will be different sides of one coin. We must have the capacity to respect all those sides. Because if we don't, those who don't wish us well are there to profit. Now, let me also plead my mitigation. I was born in Ihiala at Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital, in the heart of the war. I have no memories of the war. My earliest memories begin around 1972. But I have a disqualifying credential as I mount this place. The doctor who delivered me was Edwin Onwudiwe. Anybody here old enough to remember Edwin Onwudiwe will know that he was on the other side in that quite controversial election in 1983. So that means I come here with an original sin. If you remember, if you have read, because I'm involved, you will remember that Ikemba said in that particular book, I know I won, but my own party declared me the loser. But in 1983, I was an early teenager. I did not have a vote to cast. And today, I am not much older. I still don't have a vote to cast. If you've read Julius Caesar, Mark Antony said, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. I don't even have the standing to bury our hero, nor do I have the qualifications to praise him. When he died in 2011, the eulogies came from everywhere. Every major medium in the world carried the news. It was breaking news on CNN. Washington Post had an obituary. The Economist had, the Times of London, Telegraph of London, New York Times, every major newspaper barred on. And Chidi A has done us a world of good service, outstanding service, by compiling all of these into a testament that people should read. The title is General of the People's Army, published in 2012. Chooks, where are you? Please, I hope that copies will be available. So, I will not be able to better those eulogies. And of course, President Jonathan attended that funeral. And he said at that funeral that Ikemba had lived a most worthy and memorable life with a record of notable contributions to the evolution of modern Nigeria. He spoke for us all as the elected president of the country. I adopt his words. I will only say something, because now that the man is dead, he has become an honored ancestor. In this part of the world, we must honor and respect our ancestors and their memories. Because as Africans, in African cosmology, only three people exist: the dead, the living, and the yet unborn. We are part of the living. As an honored ancestor, we must respect and valorize his memory and his service. He was, however, a human being. He was not a saint, and he was not God. And sometimes, as living people, with the best of intentions, we try to elevate the memories of our honored ancestors beyond rational investigation and inquiry. And as a result, we don't honor their legacies properly, nor learn the right lessons from the lives they lived. And my hope is that for the Vice Chancellor and this intellectual community, that we don't make that mistake with Ikemba. The man cherished controversy. He himself did say controversy had a role in our political life. And he died, I believe, on the 26th of November, 2011. It was a Saturday. The following day, Chidi A wrote an article in Sunday Vanguard of the 27th of November, 2011. And he wrote, in part, if he saw through to earth from the back of beyond, Ikemba will be mournful if his passing didn't throw all of us into unmitigated contention. Not unmitigated mourning, unmitigated contention. That really was the measure of the man. He was comfortable in who he was. He was confident in his identity. And he was able to stand up for himself and the things he believed in. And my hope is that as we go into this, that we will respect that, and particularly for the students of this university, because this is not a political rally for me, and this should not be a political rally for us. I realize we're in political season. This is a university. It is a place where you come for ideas. It's a place where you will be exposed to things you may not have been prepared for. It is a place where you may learn things that you're uncomfortable with. But it is important as students that you respect the intellectual space that this place affords you. Your grandparents lived the war. Your parents survived the war. You're the grandchildren of the people who saw those events. And therefore, you have a challenge to honor their memory and to take your future beyond those issues for which they fought that honorable event. If you get caught up and sucked into not doing that and accepting by rote everything that you hear, you may be making a huge mistake. And that is why a legacy is important. Because a legacy is not just about one event. Ikemba's life was not just about the war, as that is. It was also much more than that. And my role here, I come here with tremendous modesty. My role really is to try to prepare those of you who are in this university today to be part of a proud generation who can contest the stories and histories of the war with dignity, confidence, and knowledge, knowing that in doing so, you are carrying forward a torch from a people who fought life and death battles to give you the opportunity to do so. And that's really where I begin. And don't forget, as young people, today we celebrate the Not Too Young to Run Act. The Not Too Young to Run Act basically is about young people and participation. Let's be clear. Ikemba was born on the 4th of November, 1933. When he became military governor, he was 32. When he declared the state of Biafra, he was 33. When he went into exile, he was 36. Thereafter, he lived for 41 years. Gowon, who led the other side in the war, was born on October 19th, 1934, nearly 1 year after Ikemba was born. At the time they fought the war, if they had lived today, they would have been celebrating the Not Too Young to Run bill. These were young men, very young men. And I don't think we are fair to them if we define the entire trajectory of their lives and achievements with reference to what they did when they were 31, 32, 33, and 34. They had much fuller lives than that. And I'd like to hope, therefore, that students of history, students of political science, international relations, law, constitutional law, public policy, will get involved in excavating their lives of service, their lives of sacrifice, their lives of commitment, and what they did to beyond the times that they were members of the Not Too Young to Run constituency. Because if we don't do that, we will not be doing justice to their legacy. So I do not come here necessarily to confine us to the Civil War. It's important to remember that we are more than that. But it's not, this is more than a story about just Ojukwu alone. It's about the generation in which he lived and the torch that they have passed on to not just us, but to the rest of Ndibo. Why do I say so? And it's very fitting that this is happening in Anambra State. I claim my origins from this state, but I mean no flattery. Anambra State is the heart of our race. It's not just because Nri Anambra. And when I say Inri, I hope that everybody here understands the symbolism of the point I make. It is because actually our contemporary civilization also begins here. In the first 33 years of the last century, Anambra produced a generation of the most phenomenal pioneers ever known, perhaps to any race, certainly in Nigeria. It began with the great Zik, born November 1904. In 1908, Louis Philip, Sir L.P. Ojukwu was born. 1914, we had two great Igbo sons, Sir Louis Mbanefo and also the late Sir Jerome Udoji. In 1917, Kenneth Dike was born. 1921, Chike Obi. 1924, Pius Okibo. Correct? Then we had, in the first 3 years of the 1930s, you had an addition to this stellar generation. In 1930, Chinua Mogu Nwachebe was born. In 1931, Ben Obiwabweze joined them. In 1932, Christopher Okibo was born. And in 1933, Emeka Anyoku and Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu were born. Of these figures, only Emeka Anyoku and Obiwabweze are left. And the late Ben Nwazogie, senior advocate of Nigeria, after whom this hall is named and memorialized, was part of that fantastic generation. And this story of legacy is really also about that generation, because they started off a lot of things. They did not always agree. Sometimes they fought. And in many ways, the fights have continued after they died. Zik, for instance, and LP were good friends, but they fell apart and fell out in 65-66. And Jerome Udoji was Ikemba's boss when Ikemba joined the administrative service in under colonial rule in 56. But 10 years later, 11 years later, Udoji left the service of the then Eastern region when Ikemba was military governor, because Ikemba had frustrated him out as the chief secretary to the government of the Eastern region. Now, Ikemba and Alex Ekweme were contemporaries at King's College. Lateef Jakonde was part of that phenomenal set in King's College, and they met up one another there. And, you know, you can tell, and of course, Louis Mbanefo served as the chief judge of Biafra. And so, these were contemporaries, and many of them have left accounts. Interestingly, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu is the only person who did not write memoirs in many ways. The others have left account in some form or the other. Pius Okibo has also written a lot of stuff. And it is not possible to deal with the legacy of any one of these without trying to contextualize it. And I don't want to come here, therefore, to arbitrate in relitigating the contexts between this generation, because I'm not qualified to wipe the shoes of any one of them. I am totally unfit to serve as shoe shiner to any of these men whose names I've mentioned. It is important, however, that we take, this university should not just celebrate one man, it should celebrate a man and his generation. And we must honor them every working day of our lives. And I hope that this university will keep alive those flames that they lit. Now, let me just summarize the rest of what I intend to say. There are, broadly speaking, I want to highlight 3 constituencies that are contesting the legacy of Ikemba and why it is important to deal with that. And here, I would prefer to say Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu or Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, because there were lots of titles, and I don't want to I don't want to be invidious to say that one title was better than the other. All those titles are important. But his biography by Frederick Fawcett was Emeka. And he always, if you read, because I'm involved, he addressed himself as Emeka. And so I want to honor the way the man chose to address himself. And by the time that he got most of those titles anyway, his identity and indeed his legacy was secure. If you remember, in 1979, in the elections in 1979, Ben Zeribe, who was buried just recently from our mama in Imo State, who was the vice presidential running mate of the late Waziri Ibrahim in the Great Nigerian People's Party, traveled to France to meet with Emeka Ojukwu to persuade him to run for the Nnewi Federal Constituency in the House of Representatives. Now, they agreed that that would happen, but when Obasanjo discovered that as head of state, he moved against GNPP and they disowned Ojukwu. So the contest over his legacy was on while he was alive. The UPN did make contact because he had long-running relationships with people in the UPN. NPP, through Jim Wobodo, made contact without involving Zik. And Zik, when he found out, was not too happy, and he distanced himself in some way from that. NPN, of course, through the late Chubo Kadibo and Alhaji Shinkafi, also did discuss with him in different places in London and in Cote d'Ivoire. And so there were people already battling over his legacy while he was alive. It's not just Abga, Nanka Bunkani. It started long, long time ago. But it's not just the politicians who are fighting over the man's legacy. You've also got, so there is a contest involving politicians whose objective is what? Political power and wealth. The problem is that Ikemba Ojukwu, when you read him and when he tells his story, he says he was a poor man. He did not make money from politics. That's one thing everybody would say about the man. And yet, a lot of the politicians who are jostling over his legacy have become billionaires from public life. They cannot somehow bear to respect the values, the public service values of the man after whom they put up all those pictures. And as citizens, at the receiving end, we've got to ask ourselves the question, is this who lived for? Is this what Biafra meant or was fought for? The second constituency is the constituency of the ethnic nationality movements who see Biafra and the war and Ojukwu as a totem for injustice that remains unredressed. And I would include broadly, although he had running battles with them, I would include even entities like Ohaneze there. He did not always agree with Ohaneze, but they are there. There is a body, a constellation of entities in that place. Bodies who see the war and the man as representation of historic injustice crying out for redress. And there is a third who see the man as a symbol of a territorial claim that must be fulfilled in our lifetime. This includes everything from MASOP to IPOP. And there are people in between who are not quite sure where they belong, for instance. The Bilia movement, for instance, straddled probably all three constituencies. And the contest really over his legacy and the deepening resurgence over Biafra could actually hold lessons for our country and beyond. Not just in the southeast, but also for the northeast, for the middle belt, where there is now a great militia movement brewing, and of course for the militia movements in the Niger Delta. But not just beyond that, to Cameroon, where you have the Ambazonia movement. And how Nigeria has reacted to the Ambazonia movement is also part of what we should be thinking about. I don't want to go into the causes of all these splinterings and why these contests exist. But what I'd like to point out is that whatever the cause may be, the persistence of this, the sense of collective victimhood or these advocacies, in my view, would suggest that far from alleviating it, the war may have deepened the sense of collective alienation of Ndibo from Nigeria and may have called into question both the reason for the war in the first place and the meaning of Nigeria's claim to have won unity. Because even if Nigeria won the war, quite clearly somebody has lost the peace. And the peace has not just been lost, it has been frittered away and wasted. And we've all got to ask ourselves the question, here and beyond, in the rest of the country, how did a country that claims to have achieved unity so seriously and severely waste the peace? So that today, every part of the country is claiming marginalization, and every part of the country is being massacred. Just last week, Shiites, who are Nigerians, were being hunted like deer on the streets of our capital city. And the president decided on that same day to leave the capital city instead of make sure that we did not have this kind of atrocity in our capital city. Whether you like it or not, a country that contrives to massacre its people without apology and without remorse cannot have peace.
It's true, bro.
Obi ndị niile a egbukwara n'egbu ga na-achụ n'anya ọsọ. Ha chọọ anyị n'ime ụlọ, ha chọọ anyị n'ezi. Ha chọọ anyị n'ukwu ụdara, ha chọọ anyị n'iyi. Onwe ebe anyị gbakwa na-aga n'ụmụnna anyị. We can only make progress if we decide to not stop killing, stop killing our people. It's not just in the Bible that someone shed blood so that blood will not be shed again. In our country, most people believe that Ndibo shed blood so that we will not shed blood again. And yet, what happens? From Zaria to Ugep, from Umwechem to Odi, every day you hear of what? Massacre. Massacre and massacre. And you will see in Nigerian history that there is karma for every massacre. Let me repeat, in Nigerian history, there is karma for every massacre. And I will just depart from my prepared text to illustrate for you. When the program started, the person who led the death, two people led the death squads in 1966. One was Lieutenant Bukasuka Dimka, the other was William Walby. William Walby led the killing of Okonweze in Abeokuta. What happened? Both of them got wasted where? In 1976. Asaba massacre. Murtala Mohammed gave the order. Ibrahim Taiwo executed it. What happened? See how they went. Yes? I'll give one more illustration from outside the war. Mamman Batsa carried out the Gep massacre in 1975. What happened to him? I will say no more. But for every massacre, for every mass killing in Nigerian history, there has been karma. And we have at some point to actually decide for ourselves, are we really interested in stopping this karma? And legacies come in different ways. Many of us remember Michael Opera as perhaps the most phenomenal administrator we've had. And legacies evolve over time. And so, if you, for instance, look at United States history, President Truman left office in 1953, January, as one of the most hated presidents. Today he is recognized as one of the greatest presidents in US history. Winston Churchill was voted the man of the empire at the half century in 1950. Today, he is recognized as arguably a villain because of his promotion of colonialism. legacies can sway. Michael Opera, if you travel around the Southeast, you cannot but respect Michael Opera and his memory. And all those people selling cashew nuts are beneficiaries and legatees of his investment in food security. And when Awolowo set up the Western Nigeria Television in 1959, the payoff line was first in Africa. The following year, Michael Opera set up Eastern Nigeria Television. The payoff line was second to none. There was what? Healthy competition. He led us into that.